right, hi everybody. Sometimes I love Facebook and sometimes it drives me absolutely bananas. So I went live on my own personal Facebook page, which I did not mean to do. And as great as I think I am with technology, this week I am just having not such a great time. So I apologize for getting over here just a little bit later than I planned to start this live video, but I'm here now, and what we're going to be reviewing today is how to make the Olson mask using a die cut. Now, you might have templates or something else that you have been using. You can download the mask templates off of a website. You can find videos all over the place. There's people who have acrylic templates available, but you guys know I work with die cuts, and so that's what this is going to be. So if you're not familiar with me, I'm Ebony Love from LoveBug Studios, and I am so happy to be with you today to talk about this awesome project. So recently, both AccuCut, which is a company that makes die cuts primarily for the craft market and for the education market, and AccuQuilt, which is a company that makes die cuts for the quilting market, have both released formats for dies that make masks. And there's actually 4 different dies. There's a die, I believe that there's a die called large mask. There's one called medium mask. There's the Olson-style mask, and then there's another die for the surgical pleated mask. And my favorite mask is the Olson-style mask. So that's the die that I chose to bring into my studio, and that's what I'm going to work with today. So after working with this die and making my very own Olson-style mask, I came up with a couple of different things that you might like to improve or help you improve the mask making. So meanwhile, as you're joining, go ahead and say hi to me in the comments or send me a heart or a like so that I know you're here. I see that Joan is here and Lisa. Hello, hello. Also, I'm very tall, so it's hard to get my whole head and the work surface in. So if I lean forward to kind of see who's here, it's because I cannot see that far away from where the computer is set up. I guess I should make I wonder if I make the font size bigger. That's an idea, right? Font size. Look at that. It works. So on my end, I'm able to make the font size bigger, and now I don't have to go forward and see who's here. So it looks like, oh, look, Springvale FBC. Hello, hello. Awesome. Okay, so working with this Olson-style mask, the die, let's just go through the die and I'll talk through a couple of the pieces. So I am someone who uses a silver marker to mark their dies. They do not come like this, and although some of the dies might have a two-tone style foam, these do not. But this die, I just outline the shapes with a silver marker, and then I draw registration lines which are perpendicular to the straight lines, perpendicular and parallel to the straight lines of the die, so that I know how to align my shapes and also what sizes to cut my shapes. So this mask die has 4 pieces to it. There's the front of the mask, so this mask piece extends over the face. There's a seam in the middle and 2 pieces that go across the front of the face. There is the cheek piece. This cheek piece is on the inside of the mask, and there are 2 pieces that cover the cheek portion. And then there is the mouth piece, and that's also 2 pieces that are cut, and that's covering this front part of the face over the nose and mouth, and that's also on the inside of the mask. And then the final piece is the strap piece. Now, I will tell you that I do not use this piece for the strap. I actually just cut strips with the fabric, and part of that is, number one, I don't like the finished size of this strap. I think it's too Personally, I think it's too narrow and fiddly to work with on a sewing machine. It's a 1 inch wide cut, which makes it a 1/4 inch finished strap. So I've been cutting my strap pieces 1.5 inches wide. The other piece is that I think the strap is too short, but that is just, personal preference. So for me, if I cut the straps with the fabric, people can decide however wide or however long they want their straps to be finished. So I use this die to cut the 3 main units. And when you are cutting these units, you need to cut 2 of each piece. Make sure that they are right sides together because these are not symmetrical pieces. So you do need to cut them either right sides together or right sides down. And if you're working with a directional piece of fabric and you lay them right sides together, you need to rotate one of the pieces 180 degrees so that when it's mirror image, they're both facing right side up. Awesome. So it looks like Dion is here, Lauren, Andrea, Donna. So great. So, and I've got a couple of Donnas. So Donna says, Donna Pierce says, it's been a long time since I've watched you. Well, welcome, Donna. Glad that you catch me. Michelle is here from North Carolina. Cynthia, another Donna. Hi. It's like Donna Day. And then Jennifer said, I had no idea they had a cutter. Good for them. Yeah, so these are available. The one that I ordered was from the AccuCut site, and this is a studio size die. So this particular die that I'm showing you is for the studio machines. It also fits in the Sizzix Big Shot Pro. If you have a Go machine, you need to get your die from AccuQuilt.com and order the mask dies that are listed under the Go machines. And so there's an Olson mask die for the Go. There's an Olson mask die for the Studio. And like I said, this also fits in the Big Shot Pro, which is the machine I'm going to use today. In terms of the size pieces, so like I said, I outline my dies and I draw the registration lines and I measure what size fabric. So for the front piece of the mask, you need a piece of fabric that is 8 inches by 7 inches. The cheek piece is a 5.5 inch square, and the mouth piece of the inside of the mask is 4 3/4 inches by 7 inches. So I haven't yet done like my full layout in terms of, okay, if I were going to cut this from a single length of fabric, what size would I cut it? Because when I'm working with this mask, I think it's important that the outside of the mask have a different fabric than the inside of the mask, and that just helps people understand like what goes toward their face and what doesn't. Now, the way that this mask is constructed, it's less critical for that because the back of the mask looks very different from the front of the mask. But I also just like the contrast and have different units. So I'm using my fabric from the Primo line, which is my designer line of fabric that was produced by Island Batik. And so these are 2 of the prints. So I've got a stripe that's going to be the front of the mask, and then this fun bubble that's going to be the outside. And then for the straps, so the straps that I am using, and I'm kind of looking around because hopefully I don't need to go and grab it, but I have a feeling that I'm going to have to take a little, when we get to the strap, we'll talk about the strap, but I might have to go pop out for a second and go grab the strap that I cut because I don't see it here, so I might have to cut another one. But we've had a little bit of time before we get to the strap, so we'll just focus on cutting this. So the die that I have for the studio dies cut up to 10 layers of fabric. So in theory, I can cut 5 Olson masks at a time, which is really great because I'm getting, not only am I cutting 5 Olson masks at a time, I'm getting all of the pieces as well because it's 6 pieces per mask. So I'm getting 30 pieces of fabric cut, or however the math goes. With that, don't ask me to do math on a live event. This is pre-recorded. I would have figured that out. But you know, in terms of volume cutting, this is the way to go. So that's the way that I prefer to do it. And what I've been doing with my customers this week and extending through at least June 1st for now is that if you place an order on my website, you're going to get a pre-cut mask kit. I'm not making it for you, but I will send you the pre-cut pieces, and that is, there's no charge for that. It's just going to appear in your box. You also don't get to pick your fabrics, but they will be batik, and of course they're going to be fun because I love batiks, and I don't work with fabric that's not fun. So, all right, so to do this, I'm just going to work with one mask right now at a time because that's what we're doing here. So, and this format, this Facebook Live format, you guys, this is all live. So this is not like a pre-recorded video that I put up to YouTube where I've got step outs and all of that stuff. You are actually seeing this mask construction take place live because I want you to make sure this can be a little bit fiddly, and I want to make sure you have this step by step and are able to do it. So I'm just over here laying out the pieces of this mask on the die where they fit, and then I need an upper layer here, which is the cutting mat, and I'm going to run that through the cutter. So it's really easy to, you know, to run this through. It's super easy to turn, and, you know, that's true whether I have 1 layer or 10 layers. And I just love the ease of use with this die. So here are my, this is the outside mask piece. So that is the outside of the mask. This is my waist. So there's a couple of scraps there that go into the pile. And then I'm pulling off the other unit. And, you know, I usually cut more layers. And so I don't always have, you know, pieces that I have to deal with in terms of, you know, having to have them cut all the way through. But this did a pretty good job. Sometimes with die cuts, you end up with, you know, shapes that aren't completely cut through, and that can be really irritating. All right, so that's the die cut piece, right? So that doesn't take very long at all. And if I had templates and I was trying to do, you know, mask making kind of in an assembly line mode, and I had to stand there and cut around a template, not only would that really exacerbate my back issue, but you know, but for me personally, if I'm going to spend the time, I want to make that time as efficient as possible, and this kind of die does that. So I'm going to set this aside and just clear off my table a little bit. So hang on a second. I'm still babying my back a little bit. So I'm just off screen a little bit here to put down this die, and then I've got to move the machine. I'm going to move this die cutter because we are done with the die cutter. So I think I'm just going to slide it instead of lifting it off the table, so I get it out of the way, off on the table over here. Okay, great. So that kind of clears off my space, and it looks like, so Mary has joined us, and Karen is here, and so is Jean and Mary Welch. Hi, everybody. So Andrea asked a question. She asked, is this a Sizzix die? So again, no, the die is not from Sizzix, but the die that I got from AccuCut fits inside the Big Shot Pro. And the Big Shot Pro is the largest machine that Sizzix makes, and you can use studio dies in the Big Shot Pro as long as the die is less than 12 inches wide. And that particular die, I think, is 10 inches wide, so it fits perfectly. All right, so I'm going to bring my sewing machine over, and I'm stitching today on a Viking opal. Let me put this guy down. Oh my gosh, sorry. I do still have a little bit of back soreness, but so I am working with this Viking opal, and I'm a little bit tangled in my power cord here, so bear with me for a second. All right. Okay, So I might have to be leaning forward a little bit to kind of show you, what we're doing. But essentially what you want is you want your units to be placed right sides together. And so if you did that when you actually cut the Olson mask, you would have these already placed right sides together. And the first thing that we're going to do with this front of the mask is we're going to stitch the front of this curve with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So again, that's right sides together. And my machine is just already set up for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's actually the foot that is set up this way. And this machine, I forget sometimes which machine has the presser foot lifter and which ones don't. But I'm just going to put this in the machine. I have reduced my seam allowance, or not the seam allowance, I've reduced my stitch length to 2.0. And for me, that just helps with the units not falling apart as I am working with them. So I am going to got to make sure everything is plugged in. Okay. All right. And let's make sure the foot pedal is plugged in, because it works better if the foot pedal is actually plugged into itself. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to stitch this seam. And again, this is just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're just following that curve. And even with this, you may want to backstitch the seams. Normally, when I quilt, I do not backstitch the seams. And that's because, when I'm quilting, I really don't want to add bulk into my piecing seams. But in this case, it might be helpful to do that backstitch just to keep the seams from coming apart. Okay, so that's my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and if I kind of push this out a little bit so you can see that there's my mask, and the flat part or the straight part goes on the bottom, and this kind of more curvy piece goes on the top. So this is the way that the mask looks. So if you have if you're having a hard time kind of understanding, how this goes, the shape of this, there's kind of more of a curvy part here. That's actually the nose piece. So you want your nose to fit into the part that is more curved. Okay, can you see that? The part that's more curved, and the straight part along the bottom is what goes along the bottom of your face. So if you have a tough time kind of visualizing what goes where, just hold it up to your face, and you'll see that that's the direction that the mask goes. So this part we can set aside, and now we can work on the mouth unit. So this mouth unit, same thing. If you laid this right sides together on your die, it will come off right sides together, and you can just work with this right under the machine. So again, the curved portion is what we're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. And again, if you want to backstitch, you can. This is not something I normally do when I'm piecing. Normally when I'm piecing, I don't use the backstitch at all. But we've got a little bit more manipulating, I think, with these units. And the bulk in the seam allowance isn't as important or noticeable on these mask units as it would be with piecing. Okay, so there we go. So that is this is the mouthpiece. This is the inside front of the mask, okay? So this is what this would look like. And actually, for mask purposes, it would go this way, right? Because the seams would go out. But again, the curviest part is your nose piece, and the straighter edge is along the bottom. So now what we need to do is we're going to fold the mask piece, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're going to fold the mask piece so that the raw edge is folded under 1/4 of an inch. So we're folding this 1/4 of an inch under, and I'm just trying to think through from a mask construction perspective. When this comes out, I want the raw edges to be to the inside. So if I take my example mask, here, that fold is, you can't see that far. So the fold that I'm folding it so that wrong sides are together. So let me come around here and see if I can do this without killing myself over the cords. But I'm folding this back 1/4 of an inch, okay? And it's so that the finished edge, so if I look at the seam part, I have a finished edge here, okay? And so I'm going to stitch that down so it's like a top stitch. So you fold it under 1/4 of an inch, and this doesn't have to be, there's not an exact science on this. They didn't put notches, I have to say, but I'm just saying if it's not exactly 1/4 of an inch, nobody is going to holler at you, okay? So, but this is, so I'm going to stitch this in my machine, and again, back stitch if you need to, just to lock the stitches in. And I am just doing a top stitch just to stitch that down, and I'll show you this in a second, but you need to do that on both sides of the mask. Okay, so this is the mouth unit, so we're going to do that on both sides of the mouth unit. So again, you're folding the raw edge back toward the seam allowances so that the front part of your mask, the edges are finished. Okay, so I'm just working on the other side here, and I'm going to put this in, take a back stitch to get this in. Okay, and go all the way to the end, another back stitch, and cut. Okay, so let me come around and show this unit to you. Okay, awesome. Here we go. Okay, so this is what this looks like here on the side. So if I'm looking at this from the wrong side, I have, this is my seam that's going to be at the front of my face, okay? And then the raw edges are turned under, and I just use a straight stitch to stitch down that strip so that, or down that fold so that the raw edges are kind of encased, okay? So that is the mouthpiece, the inside mouthpiece of the mask. So that's going to get set aside as well. Okay, now, same thing with the cheek unit. So I need to do the same thing on the cheek unit, and this time, so remember if I laid these right sides together and I want to hide the raw edge, and what's nice on this die, and let me just come around and show this to you. I know I need to figure out how to do the cords differently here if I need to do this to come in closer. So this die, it actually, the way that this is shaped is it comes down straight and then it curves. And why it does that, so it comes down straight and then it curves. That part where it's straight, that's actually telling you, that is 1/4 inch in, and that's telling you where your fold should be. Again, it doesn't need to be 100% exact, but that is the, that's kind of the signal to you of where to fold that. And if I folded those, if I have these laying right sides together on my die, then I'm folding these toward the wrong side. So that means that my fold is going to be facing up. Now, on a batik fabric, I think that the batik fabrics are a little bit harder to do this with, just because you can't tell right side versus wrong side, but it matters because these pieces are not symmetrical. So it matters right side, wrong side, because you could end up with two cheek units when you really needed one. So I just try to make sure to remember which side did I fold this on and make sure that I get that fold correct. So I'm just going to run these through, and I'm just top stitching that fold. So just like I did on the mouth unit, I am trying to just encase the raw edge, or try to make sure that the raw edge is not exposed on the right side of the mouth. Okay. Here we go. So machine wanted to do a little chewing of my unit. So back stitching can sometimes be a little challenging with the 1/4" foot, because you don't have, at least on my machine, when the 1/4" foot is in, you don't have both of the feed dogs engaged, or but the feed dogs are not both over the fabric, so that can be a little bit harder for it to do the reverse motion without chewing the fabric. All right, so here we go. So you see I folded that back to the wrong side, and that is going to be the top stitch there. All right, so that is where, and I should point out too, so yes, I am following instructions, okay? So AccuQuilt was kind enough to put up these instructions, and here's the thing, when you order a studio die, it rarely comes with instructions, but they did do a little 2-page handout to show you how to do this mask. So if you go to their website and just go to the Olson mask die, there's a link to a PDF that you can download the instructions. So I'm just double checking my instructions, which is very important to make sure I do this right. But from this point forward, we are ready to do the assembly. So I'm going to just come forward a little bit to show you. And before I do that, I need some pins. And so let me do this. I'm going to be right back. If you guys have any questions, please post them in the meeting here or in our little window. And I'm so concerned sometimes that I'm not, like when I don't see comments from people, I get concerned that the video is not still moving. So if you can do me a favor, even if it's just to say, hey, I like what you're doing. Hey, can you show me that a little bit closer? Can you slow down? Can you speed up? If you guys can just leave a comment or give me a heart, give me a like, just so that I know you're still here and you can see me. Because when I don't see the comments move, it concerns me that no one can see me. In the meantime, I'm going to go get some pins and my strap, and I'll be right back. You can probably hear me too if I do that. I should tell you that one of my shoes is off, so I'm a little bit hobbly because I don't sew with one of my shoes. I don't sew with my shoes, and so that can be a little bit weird because it feels like I'm limping. All right, so I've got my pins, and I am on my way back, and hopefully I remember to grab my strap too, so hopefully that's the only thing that I have forgotten there. So, oh, awesome. Thank you so much. So Carol's here and Cassandra. Thank you. You guys are so quiet that it's hard to tell. Like, who's listening? Is anybody listening here? Okay, awesome. So we're ready to start assembling this mask. So remember that we have our outside mask, and remember that the curvy part goes up. We also have our inside mouthpiece, okay, there, and then our 2 cheek pieces, which is great. So what we need to do is we need this outer face mask part that needs to be laid right side up, and then your mouth unit gets laid right side down. So you want the noses to match. So this curvy piece here needs to match the curvy piece on your mask. And what I like to do when I am folding this is to alternate the seam allowances. So let me just come around here. Gosh, I need to work on these cords. All right, this is actually not my usual filming location. I usually will film in the studio, the video studio that's at my house. But what's hard about filming in that studio is that all of my die cutters are here, and all of the nice background and all of that is at the film studio. But you know, we're working with what we got here. Awesome. Okay, so these two units are right sides together, and when I pin these, I'm going to take the seam allowances and press them to opposite sides so I can nest those seams. And if you're a quilter, you know all about nesting your seam allowances. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to pin that center seam allowance at the top of the mask, and I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom of the mask. Now, when this mask is worn, nobody's going to notice your seam allowances, but I'm doing this to make sure that this is going to align properly, okay? Oh, look who joined. This is Katrina. Katrina's here. Fantastic. And Lauren and Joan asked, which size die did you use? These are several sizes on the AccuQuilt website. This is actually the Olson-style mask. So there's only one size of the Olson-style mask on the website. The other two masks, or the other three masks they had, so one is a surgical mask, and then one is just called mask large, and the other is called mask medium. And I get the Olson-style mask because this is the one that I prefer. So excuse me while I lean very slowly to get my instruction sheet. Okay, so I'm also going to match up, because now this is like a three-dimensional piece. It's like making a bra, you guys, you know, or a swimsuit top. So I'm going to kind of match these curved edges and add another pin just to make sure this is going to land in the right spot. So I'm doing that on both sides at the top and the bottom. So I have a lot of pins in this right now, but that's okay. That's okay. So in the pins goes. So I will have like I think there's 6 pins in this now. Okay. So that's the outside of the mouth and the inside of the mouth getting pinned together. And now we need to pin our cheek pieces. So again, Michelle, this is the outside of the mask here, and then the mouth piece here that are getting pinned together, and those are getting pinned right sides together, matching the center seams and alternating the seam allowances so you can get a good match. The next pieces that I need to add are the cheek pieces. So can you see how the outside of the mask extends further than the mouthpiece? And so what we're doing with these cheek pieces is they're going to overlap with the mouthpiece. And the important thing is that you get them on going the right direction. And so it's hard to see that unless you lay it down. So this unit, you know, if I grab the wrong piece and try to, actually, okay, that's okay. That does work. It's fine. So even if you get these mixed up a little bit, I think it's fine. It must be symmetrical to a certain degree. But what we're doing is you just need to take the correct piece so that the wrong side is facing up, okay? And it's going to overlap your mouthpiece. Okay, this is how we're creating the filter pocket, but it's going to overlap the mouthpiece. So you want to line this up, and you're going to pin this to the mask. So again, this is on the inside of the mask. It's right sides together, and you're going to see the mouthpiece, which is what I had previously pinned, and the cheek piece that I'm adding, they're going to overlap. And that's exactly what you want. They're going to overlap by like 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and I just pin those so that they're overlapped. And I know this is a little bit hard to see, but let me get this pinned on so you can see this a little better. And I have just some strings that are kind of hanging out. But okay, so this is the side of the mask that's not pinned, and this is the side of the mask that is pinned. Okay, and if you use different pieces, different colors of fabric, this can be, a little bit more, I don't know if it's more confusing or less confusing to use contrasting fabrics. But for me, it helped. It helped me to kind of understand how, how this fits together. Okay, and again, it's the right sides together, and it's okay if the cheek piece overlaps with the mouthpiece. That's exactly what you want. It's not a mistake to have those overlapping. Okay? So just one more time. So the outside of the mask, okay? So we pinned that right sides together with the mouthpiece, and then we added the cheek pieces right sides together and overlap those with the mouthpiece, okay? So that's how it looks a little bit fiddly, but once I did this, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, and the pictures don't necessarily do this justice, but it's actually kind of a clever construction. And instead of the reason that these are created in two pieces instead of just sewing both of these is that, number one, we don't have to leave a hole for turning. Number two, it creates an area where a filter could be inserted if desired. So those are, even though it's like more pieces, it's more seams, and you have to turn the raw edges under, it's actually kind of a clever construction. And it gives you that 2 layers of fabric, which is what the, all the researchers are testing, cotton, 100% cotton, quilt shop quality. That's what's being tested, and in those 2 layers. And so this is really, great. So the next step is you're going to sew all the way around the perimeter of the mask. And remember, you don't need to leave a hole for turning. And that was so exciting to me. As I was putting this together, I was like, oh, how the heck is that going to work? And it doesn't make much sense until you actually do it and follow the instructions. So hopefully this is helping, and if you need to make this mask yourself, you have this video as a reference. So again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew completely around the perimeter of the mask. So if you have questions while I'm doing this, please add them to the comments, and I will look at them. And as I go around this mask, again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And, you could use a deeper seam allowance if you wanted. All it's going to do is just make the mask a little bit smaller. So if you do have a situation where you need to kind of make adjustments, for someone who has a smaller face, you might need to play around with that a little bit. But I found that the 1/4 inch seam allowance is just perfect, just fine for what I'm doing. And what I like to do, when I come to the end of this, is just do a little bit of a back stitch, and then I will pull this, get my foot up, I'll pull this out, and I actually just go off the corners and then do the back stitch, because I want to, to turn these corners inside out. I like to clip the bulk out of the corners, and it's a little bit safer to do that if you have secured the seam a little bit more with the back stitch. So I'm just back stitching, getting to the end, pulling it out, and then continuing to stitch, and then doing a back stitch. So I'm just back stitching the corners. I'll show you before I turn this inside out kind of what's going on with the back stitch. Okay. So here we go. And then also, I think when we get to the strap step, I'm actually going to relocate the computer, the camera, because I think that while this is fine, me sewing this way, when we get to the strap, I think you're going to want to see kind of how I am working with the straps, because I've got just a couple of little pieces of advice for you, or a couple of tips for strap making. This mask, incidentally, it works with elastic and it works with ties. And my friend Katrina, she's on, and she can tell you, she can point you to where her tutorial is going to be. And she actually has decided to replace her straps with snaps. So she's using snaps on the sides so that people can decide whether they want to use straps or elastic. So I got a little bit overzealous there when I turned the corner, so I had to cut myself out of there. But Katrina uses snaps. So she has kind of an ingenious way of finishing up the mask there. So Katrina, if you're still on and you want to post your Facebook page link and let people know where your tutorial is going to be if they're interested in making this mask with snaps instead of with ties or elastic. Okay, so this is me stitched all the way around the mask. So I just want to show you the back stitching from the corners. And I'm going to move my machine just to kind of get ready for this whole strap action. And, okay, give me a hot second here. Okay, so here is the mask. And what I did in the corner, I'm going to find the camera, is back stitching. So can you see that where the thread is just a little bit thicker here? That is the back stitching that I did. So that just reinforces the corner a little bit, and I reinforce the corners because I like to grade the seam allowances to take a little bit of the bulk out. And if you're not familiar with grading the seam allowances is a tool from Garment Construction where you're kind of undercutting and angling the seam allowances just to remove a little bit of bulk from the corners. And we don't do it super close to the seam, but we just grade that out. So see how I've kind of cut that at an angle? That's called grading the seam allowances, and that just takes out some of the bulk in the corners so that you can punch, or not punch out, you can poke out the corners and they're actually square instead of them being this rounded full of stuff in there. Okay, so we stitch this all the way around the mask. We're going to turn this mask right side out through the gap between the cheek piece and the mouthpiece. And you're only going to use one, okay? Just use one of these to turn. So if I'm picking this one, this is where I'm going to turn the entire mask right side out from that one cheek hole. So don't try to do it from both because you will end up getting lost and confused, and your mask will be all kind of tangled. Okay, So this is right side out. So now I am going to take I have a point turner here, so I'm going to take the point turner and just help me get this mask kind of turned all the way right side out. Okay, so there, Katrina posted, she's at Sun Shower Quilts, so facebook.com/sunshowerquilts, and she will talk to you all about the snap making, the snap thinner mask. Okay, so can you see how my corners are just so much crisper when the bulk is removed, so I can really kind of get those square instead of round. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And so this mask is practically finished. There's just a little bit more sewing to do to finish this up. So one thing I talked about was having, okay, so here we go. So there's the mask, and I recommend, kind of going through. I actually took this to my iron, the one that I made before, and just kind of got those edges turned so that it's nice and flat and straight. But can you see this is like, look, my mask, that's practically made, and then there's room for a filter, inserting some filter media there. Okay, so a couple of things that I need to do with this mask. One is doing a top stitch all the way around the mask, and so that's what's going to keep these seam allowances flat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and for my top stitch, I typically will use a matching thread, but this is tutorial land, so we don't use matching thread here. And this is my zipper foot. Okay, so this is the narrow zipper foot edge that I use primarily for top stitching, and it's great because I can get this foot fully supports kind of the area that I'm working in and lets me get the needle riding up along the top edge. So give me a second to just kind of adjust this. If you get vertigo or car sick or anything, you might want to look away from the screen while I wobble this a little bit and bring it down for sewing. Okay, because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here at the sewing machine. So I'm just changing seats here on my machine, and then I need my foot pedal here. So I got to move the foot pedal around to where I'm at now. Okay, great. So I'm going to put a top stitch in, and these loose threads, oh my goodness, they drive me bananas. All right, and this is probably where back stitching comes in handy with the top stitch, because you don't get really an opportunity to bury thread. So I am on the inside here, I am lining up the edge of the mask with the inside edge of this foot. The needle is in the same place. It's in just a little bit. But what's great is then I can use this edge to have my material follow, and it's just great for me. I love using this foot as a top stitch foot. So Pat says, thank you for the very helpful tutorial for this style of mask. Most helpful description I've seen. Thanks, Pat, so much. It's almost like a mask along where we're making masks together. These masks, they don't take an hour. They take probably an hour to explain, but they don't actually take a whole hour to make. They actually go pretty fast. And this is something that you could do in an assembly line fashion if you needed to. So when you get to the corners can be a little bit fiddly just because it's a corner, and the corner is a little bit thicker than the rest of the mask, and sometimes the top stitch foot doesn't like that so much. So I usually will have like a stiletto or something that I can kind of help guide the fabric so that it gets pulled through. So we're just going to go all the way around the mask this way with a top stitch. And that top stitch, like I said, is great just for keeping the two layers of the mask aligned where it needs to be. Okay, so now we're cooking. Now we're cooking with gas and we can go a little bit faster. This, I will tell you, is, you know, when I do this next time, I really do need to set up this whole station more ergonomically because, you know, this machine, this table is a great height for cutting. It's not a great height for stand-up sewing. Let me just tell you that right now. But I can stand this for a couple of minutes. So I'm just top stitching the top side of the whole mask here. All right, here we go. And almost there. I just have to turn, I think this is my last corner that I'm turning here. And that one did not give me any trouble, which is great. I love trouble-free corner turning. So just make sure that the whole mask is kind of coming with you on your journey and your filter top and your filter doesn't get caught on your open arm, the free arm of your machine. Okay, so I'm coming back around to the place where I started, and what I am going to do here is I am going to overlap that stitch a bit, and then I'm going to do a back stitch to secure the seams. I could have also done a fixed stitch to kind of fix those in, but hey, you know, this is, I'm not making masterpieces here. I'm making protective, you know, gear for going out in public. So there you go, top stitched all the way around the outside of the mask. So the next thing that I did is that, remember I said, and I'll just come up a little bit. So when I put this on, it's dappy here at the top. I know you can't hear me, but when I talk, my glasses fog up. So for me, it was important to have some sort of place to put a metal strip or some sort of nose piece so that I can insert a pipe cleaner. And so what I found is that if you take a standard pipe cleaner and cut it in half, so you're going to get 2 of these nose pieces per pipe cleaner. It's kind of the perfect size for the inside of the mask, and just all we have to do now is figure out, well, how do I attach it? And what I figured out is that if I just sew a channel, if I top stitch a channel, it's the perfect place for the mask. And my foot, my zipper foot that I'm using is also the perfect width, so let me show this to you. It's the perfect width for creating that channel. And so what I do is now when I put this through the machine, I align the outside edge of the foot with the seam that I stitched, and that's going to create the perfect size for this channel. So what I want to be able to do, and I also want this to kind of go from the edge of the pocket, the edge of the filter pocket to the other edge of the filter pocket. So what I have here is now I'm stitching with the inside of the mask up, okay? And I'm going to put this on the outside edge of the foot is aligned with my top stitching, not with the edge of the mask, with the edge of the top stitching. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back stitch. So I back stitch here to the edge and then forward stitch. And I'm just going to follow that channel and keep the edge of the foot aligned with the top stitch that I did. And you've got to manipulate the mask a little bit because it is curved, right? So you've got to kind of keep that, encourage that curve to stay straight. So I've got this going, and I'm just coming to the edge of that filter pocket. And now I can back stitch here, fix the stitch, and take it out. Okay, so it kind of did not like that fixed stitch, so I've got to my bobbin thread. I think that my cutter, see, this is like real-time sewing, right? So I think my cutter did not lock back in place. So pardon me while I give my machine a little bit of a take apart. It needs to be cleaned a little bit here. So here, Buzz, when's the last time you took your machine apart and cleaned it? All right, so I'm gonna put this back together because my cutter just didn't go back and lock where it was supposed to. So we'll just, we interrupt this class to clean out the bobbin area. All right, there we go. So I just need the bobbin, and we're getting close to the end of my bobbin thread also, so I might need to wind a couple more bobbins, but here we go. All right, this is real life, right? This is the stuff that happens to us. Okay, so now I've created that pocket for the pipe cleaner, and Katrina says things always happen when you're live, and that is so true. Okay, so there we go. So there's the channel for my wire, and now all I have to do is on the back side of the mask, I just insert the pipe cleaner into that channel. Okay. So there it goes, and it's going to get caught, it might get caught on that center seam, if that center seam. So the last time I did this, it was absolutely perfect, and it went in. It went in with no issues, and now it's getting caught on that seam. So I think my next improvement on this is to actually stitch those seams down. So I'll come in from the other side here and just get that going. See, I made it all the way to the center. All right, you guys, this worked out just fine the way I had it before, and now it's getting caught on that center seam allowance. So my advice is to stitch those seam allowances down so that they don't get caught on there. So, okay, here we go. So anyway, this, I'm not going to fuss with it, for now. But the idea is that you get that into the seam, and then you can mold it around your face, and then your glasses don't fog up anymore. So, and that's something that, when I should have written that note down on my instructions. I'll actually tell you on these instructions at step, right after step 2 and after step 3 is when you need to stitch those seam allowances down. So, so Joyce says, I just zigzag it on the seam. You can do that too. So I apologize for missing that step, you guys. For that. Also, this pipe cleaner it's not as straight as it was. Let me see if I have my other piece, because the idea of having a removable, having this as a removable piece is that you're able to, when it gets too old to be able to use, that you can pull it out, for washing or for whatever. But yeah, I have to remember to stitch that center stitch that center seam. So that center seam just needs to get stitched so that it is out of the way and you're not having to fight with it like I am. Yeah, okay, never mind. So, oh, there you go. So Lauren, here's Lauren's idea, or Tamara's idea, is to fold it over so I don't have the pointy end. So I'll try that. And then if this doesn't work, then I'm going to stop fighting with my little pipe cleaner. Oh, look. Oh, you're so brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Lauren and Tamara. Fold it over, fold the end over so it's not so pointy. And then you can get it past the seam allowance, because the end of the wire was poking into the end of the wire was poking the seam allowance, and it wouldn't go through. And now we are getting to the other side. And okay, so yep, so the wire is all the way through, and it's past here. So I can either cut this pipe cleaner and have, oh my God, thank you for my rescue, my video rescue. Fold the pipe cleaner over. Okay, awesome. So there's my channel, and then I can take a pair of wire clippers, or you know, if you bend the pipe cleaner, if you bend it back and forth a few times, it will eventually pop off and break at that weak point. And I think I counted the last time I did this, it took 25 bends for it to bend. And you guys are like, just move on, just move on. But I'm like, no, I got to get this off. It's so close to coming off. And I'm not going to use my my fancy scissors to cut this off. Okay, never mind. I will leave it. Anyway, the idea is that you cut that, and then when you put it on, you can mold the mask to your nose, and it will hold that shape, okay? So, what did we learn today? Sometimes, you know, I'll just, you know, it's a little bit of a joke, but this is why live things are very challenging, because, you know, what happens live on camera, that's what it is. But I'm so thankful to have people who are super clever on the horn with me, because folding over the sharp pointy edge is what did it. But the other thing you can do is stitch those seam allowances down before you get to the steps, so that they don't get caught together. Okay, so that is the nose piece. Okay, and then the other piece is that, oh, and then also, okay, so bloopers, make sure you put the filter on the right edge of your, or put your nose guard on the right edge of your mask. I actually put mine on upside down. But hey, now I have a chin guard. Oh my God, you guys. All right, so I put the channel on the wrong side, so make sure you do it at the nose piece so you actually have a nose guard. All right, so, but you know what? These are things that they can be fixed. And I will fix them. And then Donna said remove for washing. Yeah, I would definitely, I would remove this for washing, because the pipe cleaners, they don't use stainless steel wire. So these wires are something that can rust. And so, you know, and they can develop weak spots. So it's always great if you can make these so that you can insert them and take them out, just in case you need to. So, but fold over the pointy ends and they won't stab your fabric. All right, so the next couple of things. So we were going to talk about straps, okay? So the way that this mask works, and Katrina's going to talk to you about this when she shows you snaps, but essentially what you do is you fold over the edge of the mask and create a channel for your, they create a channel for the strap, okay? So, and you're going to go, well, how do you make the strap? So my straps are cut from 1.5 inches wide by width of fabric. That's how wide they are. And so when I create this channel, I'm going to make this strap and fold this over, And I tend to just eyeball this, and I do stitch this with the strap in the channel. And again, I use my zipper foot as a top stitch, and as I'm stitching this, so I'm going to show this to you, and when I stitch this, I just pull the strap out of the way. So I just fold that over, and once I know that's the right width of the channel, I just pull the strap out of the way to stitch this down. So when I folded this down, I am following the original top stitch of the edge, okay? And so I've got this folded down, and then I'm just, oh, you can't see what I'm doing. I folded this down, and then I pull the strap out of the way so that it doesn't get stitched. And I'm following the original top stitching, okay? Well, I'm trying my best to follow the original top stitching here. So I've just folded that over toward the back side of the mask, do a little back stitching, and then that's it. So I haven't stitched, doing it that way, I haven't stitched the actual strap into the mask. I've just created a channel that's the correct width and tried to follow my original top stitching on the edge. And when I'm sewing, I just yank the strap out of the way and bend it back so I don't stitch over it. So that's one way to do it. That's the way I do it. Katrina has a different way with snaps. And the nice thing, the awesome thing about doing that with the straps, if you're using snaps, is that you can change out whether it's elastic or strap material. So that is my method for getting the straps in there. So the strap is not sewn to the mask. I have created a channel for the strap. Other ways that you could do this is go ahead and create the channel and just stitch it, and then use a crochet hook or a, what do you call those? The sweatshirt string threaders to thread it through. So pretend this is a crochet hook. If you stitch that, you can certainly insert a hook of some kind or some sort of strap maker and just pull it through the channel. So there's a couple of ways to do this. So yes, Joyce, you can thread it through. You can do it this way. You can use snaps. There's all sorts of ways that you can do it. And if you worry about your ability to eyeball that fold and stitch it with the strap in there without stitching the strap to the mask, then I certainly would recommend that you do that. Okay, so real quick, let's talk about, bodkin. Yep, bodkin works just as well. So let's talk a little bit about making these straps. So again, I cut my straps 1.5 inches by width of fabric. And that 1.5 inches by width of fabric fits into the 18 millimeter bias tape maker. Okay, so this is certainly something that you can use. But the hottest thing on the internet right now, safety pin, that works too. The hottest thing on the internet right now is, instead of using this bias tape maker, is using a paper jig, which I have. And you're going to go, what? So Joyce says, how long are the straps? They're with the fabric. So that could be 40 inches, 42 inches, 35 inches, whatever your width of fabric is. But my width of fabric, I think, is 42. And the reason I do that is because it gives you all sorts of options in terms of being able to tie them. The other thing that I will say too, and I think I might need a little bit longer strap than this, but here's a cool thing that you can do too, is take the same strap and thread it through this side. And I'm just going to show this to you. You're going to go, what the heck? So we're going to pretend that I have created a channel on this side, and I'm going to create, I'm going to tie a pin. or not tie a pin. I'm going to push a pin through here. And please don't stab yourself in the face, Ebony. Okay, so notice how this is the same strap. Okay, this is the same strap. So I think that this probably needs to be a little bit longer, but check this out. You can take the same strap and put the mask over this way and just tie it here. So you've got the strap, the single strap, I don't know where it went here. The single strap goes over your head, and then you can tighten it with the other two straps. Okay? So this is a little bit funky because I have my headset on, but that's another thing you can do is just use a single strap to do that and thread it through that way. So that's one less thing to tie. So there's you have a couple of options, and if you leave, yes, like a halter top, and if you leave enough room for this, and you can do it the other way too, and again, I didn't stitch this the proper way, but I could have that halter on the bottom and have the strap adjust on the top of my head instead. So I could do this and have it tie up this way. And then I would just have this tie at the top of my head with the other part of it at the base of my neck. So that's an option too. So the other mask that I made, this one has two independent straps. Okay, so I did this one with two independent straps, and these straps are with the fabric. Okay, so lots of strap options. Other people like elastic. I personally don't like elastic because I like stuff, I really don't like stuff touching my face. So the headset is hard enough. I don't wear necklaces. I hate lanyards and those types of things because I just hate stuff kind of touching me. And so for me, the elastic behind the ears would just bother me. I'm much better with something that I can kind of tie up that's away from, that's away from my face. But, and Katrina said if you wear a bun, it's really sturdy. So if you use that tie at the top and you wear a bun, it's really sturdy. So I think that's probably the modification that I'm going to make to my future mask is to just use one strap with the halter part at the bottom and the strap at the top. And then that's going to keep stuff off my face and off my neck, and I will like it so much better than that. So let's talk about the straps. So you can bias tape makers. If you use the size 18 bias tape maker, that's what you can use the 1.5 width fabric for. Okay. Now the traditional way of using the bias tape maker is you have to insert the fabric and thread it through and get it started. But you're also having to stand at the ironing board and iron them. What I did instead, and I tried this out earlier, this is like the hottest thing on the internet, is I cut, a couple of things that are really hot on the internet. One, you can use T-shirt material. So if you cut 1-inch strips from T-shirt material, and T-shirt is a knit, but the way that it's knit is if you cut across, if you're wearing a shirt and you cut strips this way and then cut the seams off and stretch the fabric, those can make ties as well. Joan uses stretch lace. There's all sorts of things you can do. So you don't have to hand make these ties, but the ties that are going into my kits online, so remember if you order on my website, every order will have one of these mask kits included, and I'm going to go ahead and put 2 straps in there because I don't know what you're going to do, but you'll get all 6 of the mask pieces plus 2 straps, and it's just going to go into any order. That's lovebugstudios.com if you're interested. Our list says 1-inch wide T-shirt material and stretch it out. It will roll itself into a 52-inch long strip, which is great. So the other thing that's really cool that I found on the internet is you make yourself a jig. And this jig is from cardstock. It's about 3 inches long. And I actually cut it at 1 3/4 inches. So it's a 1/4 inch wider than my strap fabric. And I folded it in half and then folded the ends inside. So it's like a cardboard bias tape maker, okay? And what this is doing is this is saving me time, so I don't have to iron, and I can go straight from the cut strip to sewing, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm taking this and I'm putting this inside this little jig that I've created, and I'm folding the fabric to the center. And I have a little bit of fabric exposed at the top. Why? Because I need something to grab onto. I need something for the machine to grab onto, okay? And then I've got this, sorry, this is hard to show you and then get it lined properly for me to sew. But you're getting this, you're inserting it into the jig, and I'm going to have to lay this flat on the table. But you're inserting this into the jig. You're centering that. You're folding these edges in, okay? And then folding it in half. So you've made yourself a little bit of a jig. Then I'm going to take this to my machine and insert this into the machine. Again, you can backstitch if you want on the strap. Okay, so I'm coming up to where the jig is. I need my strap material straight, and I'm going to take this jig and pull it, okay? And as I pull it, it's forming, okay? It's forming the unit. So let me see if I can move you in a little bit closer so you can see that. So as I fold this, or as I pull it, it's forming the rest of this strap. So I'm going to pull this a little bit more and then sew. Okay? So get yourself untangled here. Sew up to the jig. Pull it. Okay, so I'm pulling the jig. And I stop with the needle down, okay? So you want to pull the jig so it forms down here, okay? And yeah, this is, it's a little bit, it takes a little bit of practice here. But what I found is that I could do this much faster than going to the ironing board and ironing this and, you know, getting it pressed in half and then, you know, pressing it in half again and then taking it here at the machine, okay? So this is here. So there's a question about the dimensions of the jig. So the strap is 1.5 inches. The jig is 1 3/4. So the jig is a little bit wider than the fabric, and I just, because I'm using cardstock, I needed a little bit extra space. So I cut the jig 1/4 inch wider than the strap that I'm making, but you still just fold it in half and, you know, sew a little bit, pull your jig down, and sew a little bit more. So this is like, you know, this is really incredible to, like, if you are making straps, it can speed up your, you know, it can speed up your production of this. And so I did a couple of these earlier where, you know, and I did straps in just a couple of minutes. And you can find, you know, videos on the internet that just do this a little bit faster than I do. But that's the idea, is to have this jig, and you're basically stitching and forming it at the same time. If you have a bias tape maker, you can do the same thing. So I'm going to insert my strap here, into the bias tape maker. So what's a little bit different about the bias tape maker is that it doesn't come out as well pressed. So let me just adjust this, and I can kind of show this to you once this gets adjusted. So as it's coming out of the bias tape maker, it's folded, but it's not as well pressed. So what happens is that when you're sewing this, and let me just get this, I wanted to just get this to a point. This strap's going to look a little bit crazy because I'm doing it with two different methods, but I wanted you to see the bias tape maker example as well. So here's my bias tape maker, here's my strap, and what you have to do with the bias tape maker is you need to kind of pull it down a little bit more to give yourself room, because you have to do this last fold, okay, and you have to hold this so that it's folded down. So here I can come up, and I can't get as close to the end where my bias tape maker is, but I can pull this down until I get enough room to fold this in half, and then I can do this. So it's a little bit slower than the jig, I think, but it's the same principle. So if you don't feel comfortable making a paper jig, or you find that to be a little bit fiddly, you can do it also with your bias tape maker. Okay? And the thing that I like about this is that I don't have to guess at the jig size. Right? I don't have to keep guessing about what that looks like, and, you know, is it wide enough, and what happens if I bend it, because my bias tape maker is metal. So I'm just pulling that through the bias tape maker, folding it in half, and continuing to stitch. Okay, so that's the strap making procedure. So I would say, you know, if you're going to be making a lot of these bias tape type straps, and I did not cut the fabric on the bias, I cut it cross grain, which is perfectly fine to do. So that is the bias tape method, and that went a little bit crazy, but you guys get the idea, right? Okay, so that's the fast way of making straps, either with the paper jig, and again, I cut my straps 1.5 inches wide. My jig is 1 3/4 out of cardstock, but you can also just use the 18mm bias tape maker there. So awesome. So Karen says she saw the paper trick today. It was definitely amazing. You know, but I don't want those to end up like Pinterest fails. Like you see this like really cool thing, and it turns out that they did like some camera magic. So I had to try it myself, and it works, but it's a little fiddly. The bias tape maker works. It's just not as, the jig actually does a really great job of pressing it. So it's like it's pressed and folded in one, where the bias tape maker folds it, but it's not, it's really just folded, and the edges aren't really crisp. Okay, so Jamie says, now I understand how you did the channel for the nose wire. I have the Martelli template, which doesn't have the separate pieces for the backside and filter insertion, but I think I can figure out how to accommodate. Thanks so much for the demo. You are so welcome, Jamie. I hope that that helps you so much. So Laurie says, is there a pattern? So I don't have the pattern, but if you search for Olson mask pattern, you can find one with the template pieces. There are people that are carrying the acrylic templates that you can purchase. AccuQuilt has a die. They also have an instruction sheet. So AccuQuilt's instruction sheet does not give you templates because they sell dies. So why would they give you a template? You should have the die. But they do have a pretty well put together instruction sheet that you can download on their website. But you know, any any Olson mask pattern that's out there, aside from, this is more instruction sheet than pattern. But if you just Google Olson mask, you can get that. For my folks, if you are ordering from my website from now through June 1st, and at least June 1st, let's be honest, I don't know what's going to happen, but at least through June 1st, I'm going to be including a die-cut mask kit for you. I will not sew it, but I will cut it out of luscious batik fabric, and so you'll get the 6 mask pieces and the 2 straps, and I will print a copy for this for you as well to include, so you have that. And then we have this video together. So just a couple of final tips. Remember that the top of your mask is where it bows out for the nose, and that's where you want your channel to be for your wire. When you are using your wire, half a pipe cleaner is great. Tip that came from folks here on this video is to fold over the raw edge of the pipe cleaner so that you can insert it into your channel and it won't get caught on your seams. And then it goes in nicely and neatly, and then you can form your nose piece and it will stay nice and nose-shaped for you. And that's really helpful for people with glasses because it'll keep your breath fumes heading downward so your glasses don't get fogged. Joyce says, I got my pattern from Unity Point Hospital in Cedar Rapids. So, yeah, there you go. Unity Point, Olson mask pattern. That should be a great Google search for you guys. So Donna says, this demo has been great. Many thanks. You're so welcome. Lauren learned lots today. Thank you so much. Tamara says, I like the walking foot too. Use your walking foot, use your straight edge foot, use your zigzag foot, whatever you think you want to do. Lauren also said, another thought on the wire inserting, put the wire in place and then use your zipper foot to sew next to the wire. Then you don't have to push it through the seam. That is a great idea, Lauren. Part of the reason that I wanted to do that is because if the wire fails for some reason, or you want to take it out for washing because the pipe cleaners are not stainless steel, then you can take that pipe cleaner out and reinsert it. So those are my tips today. So I think those are all the questions that I saw. Michelle says, this was awesome. Thank you so much. Joyce says they also have a video, so that works too. Whatever you need. Katrina over at Sunshower Quilt, she's going to be posting a video on how she used snaps to create a mask that is a little bit convertible, so you can convert it for straps or elastics or whatever you want to do. So there are so many options for these masks, you guys, but for me, the biggest thing for me was having that die available so I could just cut it. And, and then the rest of it is just kind of personal preference, but the hump that I needed to get over was the cutting, which is usually my hump for everything. So that's what I have for you guys. If you guys have additional questions, post them on my page. Would love for you to like and follow my page. LoveBugStudios.com is my website where you can get more information. And like I said, if you place an order between now and June 1st, you will get a pre-cut mask kit in your order, and that's the 6 pieces and the 2 straps. I will not sew it for you. That's for you to do. But thank you so much for joining me. This is also part of the Designers Quilt Show, which you can get more information at designersquiltshow.com. There's over 20 designers who are doing, different deals, showing you quilts. There's also other classes that are happening throughout the week. I have another class tomorrow, which is actually a redo of my the trunk show from last week, where I'm going to be taking you through my batik design process. I went back and watched that video, and there were only 9 minutes when I think I talked for 18. So there's a bunch of stuff that's missing on that original video. So join me tomorrow, 2 p.m., same time, same place, right here. It won't be as long as this class was, but it'll just be the full view of how I designed batik fabric. So it's taking you behind the scenes for showing you how I designed Primo. And Carol asked, the Facebook site for snaps. So Katrina Kahn of Sunshower Quilts. So it's facebook.com/sunshowerquilts, and she will be doing that video over on her page. I don't know when, but if you go and follow her page, you will see that. So Joyce asked, do you dye your own batiks? I don't dye them myself, but I designed the chop, which is the what they use for the wax resist, and I designed the colorway, working with the artisans over in Bali to come up with this fabulous fabric. I love it so much. So please join me tomorrow, and I'll show you the whole line. It's really great. Sandy says, thanks so much. You cleared up all my issues. You're great. Thank you, Sandy. I'm glad that this was helpful, and hopefully, now people can make the Olson mask with the filter pocket without so many issues. So thanks so much. I'm going to head out and have some lunch. So enjoy the rest of Designers Quilt Show. Again, designersquiltshow.com. There are of other designers, there's other classes, there's quilts, there's all kinds of stuff. So we'll see you there later. Okay? Bye, everybody. Oh, Katrina says she's going to do her live today. So go follow her page, Sunshower Quilts. Bye, you guys.